I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and welcome back to another edition of This Week in Cars. This week we reveal how long you'll be waiting for a new Land Cruiser 300 series if you order one now, and how you might be able to pick up a demo sooner than that. There's the new Polestar 2 to compete with the Tesla Model 3, that's been priced for Australia under 60 grand, and are you ready to trust Jeep again? Because they want to be trusted, they're bringing the new Grand Cherokee to Australia next year. But first, onto the most anticipated four-wheel drive launch of 2021, the new Toyota Land Cruiser 300 series. Australia and Land Cruiser are synonymous with one another, and most of the development of this vehicle occurs in Australia. That's because we have some of the most punishing conditions in the world, and these are the vehicles you see when you actually travel in the outback. So when will you be able to get your hands on a new 300 series? Because there's been quite a gap between the last 200 series being sold earlier in 2021 and when you'll actually be able to take delivery of a 300 series. There's 500 examples of the new Land Cruiser in the country at this point in time, and they've been assigned to Toyota dealers all around Australia. However, they've been assigned under the condition that they are demonstrators, and dealers have to hold on to them for an unspecified amount of time for use as a demo. But that amount of time is limited. So within the next couple of months, dealers will be free to trade their demonstrator Land Cruiser 300 series vehicles, and they don't have to charge the listed prices of the Land Cruiser 300 models. Instead, Toyota Australia Vice President of Sales and Marketing Sean Hanley told Chasing Cars today that dealers are free to trade their demos according to market conditions. We'll pop what Mr. Hanley said up on screen so you can read it word for word. But what that means is if you want to jump the queue for a 300 series, you're probably going to be paying over the listed price, which ranges all the way from $89,990 for the base 300 series GX, all the way up to $138,790 for a top spec Sahara ZX, and there's a bunch of different trims that fall in between. But let's say you don't want a demo and you don't want to pay over the odds. What happens if you place an order for a Land Cruiser 300 today? Well, Toyota say they've received over 10,000 expressions of interest in the 300 series cruiser. Now, of course, not all of those EOIs convert into firm paid-for orders, but what it means is that there's probably at least a few thousand people waiting for delivery in Australia. If you're one of them, you can let me know down below this video and tell us what you've heard from your dealer. Big catch, there's been no right-hand drive production of the Land Cruiser 300 series in September, and there won't be any in October either. Best case scenario, your car will be built in November and delivered around January or February 2022. Speaking of Toyota, this week the Japanese marque unveiled a GR Hilux for the first time, with a bit of a catch. It's the GR Hilux being entered in next year's Dakar Rally, which kicks off in Saudi Arabia in January 2022. Now, what we do know is that Toyota Gazoo Racing does take inspiration from motorsport when they plan what production vehicles to build. The GR Yaris Hot Hatch was really the end result of Toyota's long-running success in World Rally, so it's entirely possible that should the GR Hilux garner sufficient attention in the Dakar Rally, we may see cues from that vehicle being applied to a future GR Hilux, which Toyota Australia is very interested in taking if the company as a whole decides to make one. So what is the Dakar GR Hilux? Well, it uses a version of the Land Cruiser 300 series petrol V6 engine, which is available in overseas markets. It's a 3.5 twin turbo. Effectively, it comes from the Lexus LS 500 limo, and it makes well over 305 kilowatts of power in the Dakar GR Hilux. Plus, it's wearing 37-inch tyres and a whole bunch of other modifications that you need if you're going to submit a vehicle to one of the most punishing rallies in the world. Jeep is on a long march to restore its reputation in Australia with its customers. That's no secret. The brand has publicly stated that they are effectively doing reputation repair, as everybody knows that the outgoing WK and WK2 Grand Cherokee was at times problematic. Next year, there'll be a new WL generation Grand Cherokee, the 5th generation of this famous American nameplate, and Jeep are very keen to emphasize the additional quality and durability testing that has gone into this new large SUV, including right here in Australia. Despite all the difficulties around COVID and quarantine here in Australia, Jeep actually spent quite a bit of time a few months ago doing final quality testing in outback Australia. So it is nice to know that the car has actually been driven and tuned and engineered right here in Australia for our conditions. Now, the big news with the new Grand Cherokee is that you'll be able to get a 7-seat L model, and that's coming in the first half of 2022, while the short wheelbase 5-seat version is coming in late 22. And the short wheelbase will be available in Australia with a plug-in hybrid powertrain that teams a 2-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol with dual electric motors and a 17 kilowatt hour battery, of which only 15 kilowatt hours is usable, to deliver an expected range of about 40 kilometres in EV mode. Jeep says the plug-in hybrid will actually be the most capable Grand Cherokee off-road thanks to its instant electric torque, and the engine and the motors working together produce a staggering 280 kilowatts of power. New American EV specialist Rivian has recommitted itself to delivering versions of its R1T Ute and R1S large SUV in right-hand drive. Now, our eagle-eyed spotters here in Sydney noticed one example each of the Rivian Ute and SUV sitting on the tarmac at Sydney Airport on their way back from cold weather testing in New Zealand. We also understand that a bunch of local testing has also been done on the EVs here in Australia, which is always a good sign. Now, these vehicles aren't really Tesla rivals. Instead, they push EVs into new terrain, and that is serious dedicated off-roading vehicles that still have that real layer of polish and luxury. As you can see from these images of Rivian's products, they look pretty darn good. The only thing stopping the cars from coming to Australia sooner is that there is overwhelming demand for them in the US, and the company says they're going to clear their US and Canadian waitlists first, which is expected to take around 12 months, with the company confirming that people placing orders in America now will have their Rivians delivered with a 2023 compliance plate. So we should expect to see some examples landing in Australia sometime in 2023 or even 2024. The company has also flagged the need for a second factory. Expected sales are that strong. The rather quirky looking Genesis GV60 full EV has now been detailed with additional specifications released for the SUV, which will arrive in Australia next year. At least 3 different versions will be available, with the standard rear-wheel drive model offering the best range of the lineup at 451 kilometers from a 77 kilowatt hour battery, with its single rear motor producing 168 kilowatts of power. A dual motor version of the GV60 will also be available, with the all-wheel drive system giving a complete output of 234 kilowatts before a performance grade takes the flagship mantle, offering 320 kilowatts of power. Sitting on the same eGMP electric vehicle architecture as the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Kia EV6, the GV60, like those vehicles, benefits from full whack 350 kilowatt ultra rapid charging speeds. Find a compatible charger and you'll blast from 10 to 80% charge in just 18 minutes, which is seriously fast for any EV, the fastest on the market at this point, in fact. Plus, there was a bit of a surprise packet with the GV60, and I don't just mean the interesting appearance inside and out. This vehicle actually has drift mode, a function that we haven't heard about for the Ioniq 5 or the EV6. Genesis says this will allow easy oversteer with the GV60, which certainly sounds like a lot of fun. Also in electrification news in Australia this week, the new Polestar 2 is coming to Australia at the end of the month, and in a real shock, it's been priced to compete directly with the Tesla Model 3. We knew the two sedans were approximately the same size, even though the Polestar 2 is officially a 5-door liftback, but up until now, the Model 3 has been effectively unchallenged in Australia's burgeoning EV segment in terms of value for money. That's no longer the case, with Polestar deciding to bring in a base model, standard range, single motor Polestar 2 for actually slightly less than the Model 3 at $59,900 plus on-road costs. There are 2 other iterations, being a long-range single motor, that's a front-wheel drive setup, and also a long-range dual motor all-wheel drive setup. How have they done it? Well, they've basically stripped out some equipment from the cars in order to bring that price of entry down. There are 3 options packages that can add in a degree of opulence to the Polestar 2, and also the flagship long-range dual motor has a performance pack option with things like adjustable Erlens dampers and gold brake calipers and forged alloy wheels, so it's something of a competitor to the Tesla Model 3 performance, although not quite on the same level in terms of straight line speed. Now, range differs depending on the configuration of Polestar 2 that you go for. The entry car offers 440 kilometers of range WLTP with its single motor setup and standard battery. Long range versions with their 75 kilowatt hour battery offer up to 540 kilometers of range, which really does give the Model 3 that squarer competition. Opting for the dual motor does reduce range a little bit, but it gives you the surety of all-wheel drive, which some people will certainly appreciate. Polestar will soon expand their lineup with a range of SUVs, but for now, they'll start in Australia with the rather svelte Polestar 2. The long-delayed Ford Escape plug-in hybrid will finally reach Australian shores in early 2022, with the brand providing chasing cars with a comprehensive update this week. The plug-in hybrid, which is based on the Escape ST line specification, offers 56 kilometers of rated range on EV mode alone, but it can also work in tandem with a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated petrol engine, providing something of a sprightly offer within the Escape lineup. And that's saying something in itself because all Escapes are pretty powerful here in Australia. There were two main reasons behind the long delay for the Escape plug-in hybrid. The first was a range of battery cooling issues in other markets that needed to be addressed by Ford's quality team, but there's also been a wide shortage of semiconductors and other parts that have affected not just Ford, but really every manufacturer, and has delayed a huge slate of cars for the Australian market. NCAP have been back at the crash testing game this week with the new Isuzu MU-X off-roading wagon scoring 5 stars, following the same result for the Toyota Yaris Cross small SUV last week. Results across the board were pretty good for occupant protection, 87% for adults and 85% for children, though vulnerable road user protection in terms of pedestrian and cyclists was a little bit lower, but not low enough to detract from the car's overall rating. NCAP also spoke highly of the vehicle's standard suite of adaptive safety technologies, though it doesn't get reversing AEB. The revised Subaru Forester midsize SUV will arrive in Australia in November, a month later than expected, even though there are a number of demonstrator vehicles already on the ground and available for test drive. It's part of the wider semiconductor shortage affecting the whole automotive industry, but the facelift will arrive alongside a range of changes to the specification for the Forester in Australia. Prices are up between $700 and $900 across the range, but there's also additional equipment on most cars, and now every Forester bar the base model includes Subaru's safety suite, which does have things like reversing AEB. The Forester, anecdotally, also remains one of the only vehicles on the market to have a CD player on all grades, but there's also helpful features now like power adjustment for the passenger seat across most of the range, which remains very rare on midsize SUVs in Australia, and it's certainly a nice creature comfort to have. Now, the looks have also been tweaked. Whether or not you like those, you'll have to tell me down below. The engines remain the same, the 2.5 litre naturally aspirated flat 4, or the 2 litre version with a very mild hybrid system. However, there's no talk of the 1.8 litre turbo petrol coming to Australia. You can get it in Japan. It would make the Forester talkier and more drivable. We hope to see it at some point in the future, perhaps as something of a return of the Forester XT. In today's news wrap, I've only covered off a slice of the 26 fantastic news stories our talented team of journalists wrote across the week. Head over to chasingcars.com.au to read the rest of them and really get briefed on what's happening in the automotive industry. You can also sign up for our monthly email newsletter. Also this week, we published a bunch of reviews on new cars on our site and over on our YouTube channel as well. We've now got reviews on the Hyundai Venue Active, the starter pack Hyundai small SUV, the Mazda MX-30 E35 Astina, the electric Mazda with 200 kilometers of range and a price a little bit higher than that Polestar 2 that I covered earlier in this video. And yesterday I was off driving the Audi Q5 45 TFSI, the 2 litre turbo petrol Q5 that a lot of people buy here in Australia, but is it better than the diesel versions? You can check out that review over on our YouTube channel. This week, we've also been road testing a bunch of interesting new cars that we'll be able to talk about very soon, including the Kia Sorento plug-in hybrid. Looking forward to sharing my insights on that car shortly. We've also been driving the Toyota Kluger GX Hybrid, the Genesis G80 diesel, and the Mazda MX-5 GT RS, and reviews on each of those cars are coming to the channel soon. So I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel down below, help us get to 100K, check out the rest of our stories over on chasingcars.com.au, leave me any comments or tips down below this video, I do read them all, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars and have a great weekend.